For these questions, we're going to write the fraction in simplest form. Simplest form is just a fraction that's made from the smallest number possible, but it's still equivalent. So let's look at some rules that can help you figure out when and how to simplify a fraction. So the first rule asks, is the numerator 1? Well, if the numerator is 1, then the fraction is already in its simplest form. So all of these fractions are already in simplest form and you can't simplify them. So if you don't get that lucky and see a 1, then you can look at the other rule. It says, are they in counting order? So if the numerator and the denominator are in counting order, then it's already in its simplest form. So 2/3, 4/5, 6/7, they're already simplified. Well, if they're not in counting order, you can check and see if they're doubles. See how 3 and 6 are doubles? If your fraction is made of doubles, then it will simplify to a half. So 2/4 equals a half, 3/6 is a half, 6/12 is a half, and so forth. Well, if they're not doubles, we need to look at some more rules. So the fourth one asks, will the numerator go evenly into the denominator? So will 5 go into 15? If the answer is yes, then you can just divide them both by the numerator. So for 2/6, since 2 goes into 6, you can divide them both by 2. 2/8, you can divide them both by 2. 3/6, since 3 goes into 6, you can divide them both by 3. And that's because if your numerator goes evenly into your denominator, it's a factor. Well, if that's not the case, you can look to see if they're both even. If your numerator and your denominator are both even, you can just divide them both by 2. And then maybe again if they're still both even, and that helps you to get to a simpler form. Or you can look and see if your denominator is prime. If your denominator is prime, then you know it's already in its simplest form. And remember, prime just means the only factors it has is 1 and itself. And if you've checked all of those and none of those apply to your problem, then you're just going to have to use the greatest common factor method to find your simplest form. So let's look at some examples. On number 1, we have 4/8. Well, 4/8 I see as doubles, and the rule says if they're doubles, then the simplest form is going to be a half. So 4/8 would be simplified to a half. All right, let's look at 10/15. Well, it's not a 1, they're not in counting order, they're not doubles. 10 doesn't go evenly into 15, and they're not both even, and 15 is not a prime number. So 10/15, none of these tricks will help us. So we're going to have to use the greatest common factor method. So for 10/15, we need to look at the factors of 10, which are 1, 2, 5, and 10, and the factors of 15, which are 1, 3, 5, and 15, and find the greatest common factor, which is 5. So then we just divide both of them by 5 to make a more simpler fraction. So 10 divided by 5 is 2, and 15 divided by 5 is 3. And now this is in its simplest form. So let's look at number 3. We have 3/6. Well, I see they're doubles, and the rule says if they're doubles, then half will be the simplest form. So 3/6 will simplify to a half. So for number 4, we have 8/12. So I know that the rule that follows is that they're both even. So if I have 8/12 and I divide them both by 2, I'm going to get 4/6. But they're still even, so I know I can divide them both by 2 again, and that would be 2/3. So 2/3 is the simplest form. I know it's simplest because it's in counting order. So 8/12 will simplify to 2/3. Let's look at number 5. We have 8/48. Well, I know that since 8 will go evenly into 48, I can do this rule. Divide them both by the numerator. So 8 divided by 8 is 1, and 48 divided by 8 is 6. So 1/6 is the simplest form. So let's do one more together. We have 14 21sts. So I don't see a 1. They're not in counting order. They're not doubles. 14 doesn't go into 21. They're not both even. 21 is not prime. So I'm going to have to do the greatest common factor method. So the factors of 14 are 1, 2, 7, and 14. And the factors of 21 are 1, 3, 7, and 21. So I see my greatest common factor is 7. So I'm going to divide them both by 7. 14 divided by 7 is 2. And 21 divided by 7 is 3. So 2/3 is the simplest form. All right, you try some on your own, and if you need help, you can come back and rewatch the video. Good luck!